It is 9:30, so we're going to get started as we always do. Just a reminder, please mute your phones so that we can have a productive conversation. And also, we will, of course, take questions that were submitted beforehand first. However, we do have the chat box open, and we are going to take questions from the chat box once we get through the questions that were submitted ahead of time. And like always, we're going to start the way we always do. And I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Turner to give some opening remarks. Commissioner.
Thank you, Karen. Good morning, everyone. Again, appreciate your time and your engagement on these office hours. We certainly think there's value in that, and we want you to continue to be encouraged and participate in this. We certainly need to hear from you, and we want to continue our partnership. We had a very productive week last week. Kara had alluded to on the call last week our conversation we were able to have at the governor's press conference, but then there were also some other media requests that we were able to answer relative to what we're doing together in the spirit of partnership with individuals with disabilities all across the state of Tennessee, specifically built around enabling technology, work programs with employment, just a lot of good things that folks are focusing on right now. And I want you to be encouraged because the people need to hear good news right now, regardless of political affiliation, where you are in the state. People want to hear good news, and what we're doing together is providing hope and providing opportunities for people to be their very best. And those stories are getting out there, and I want you to be encouraged because you're a huge part of that. And as we're continuing to have conversations around integration and building the system and what that looks like, it's been a lot of fun to see these conversations take on a life of their own around people being the main focus of that. So I know we're going to be able to continue that energy, and we're going to be able to continue to focus on what matters. And I just appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate your teams partnering with us to make sure that we're holding each other accountable to be the very best. So I'm looking forward to the questions today. With that, I'll kick it back to Kara. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just for everyone's information, Commissioner Turner participated in an interview with WKRN News 2 here in Nashville this weekend. It ran on the Weekend Morning Show. We have linked to that on our Facebook page, and would definitely encourage everyone to watch that and see how we have discussed with our partners in the news media some of the things we're doing to keep people safe, make sure that they have jobs available, and also some of the other things we're doing around testing as well. I do want to start, before we get to questions, to talk to Dr. Bruce Davis. He has an update on some of our testing, and I think he'd like to give an update on where we are on some of that.
Thank you, Kara. Yes, so I just wanted to point out one thing about testing. There are a couple of questions that we have to respond to here, and I'll respond to those in just a moment. But I did want to mention that our testing, I think, for staff is going well. I did hear some report, and actually one of the questions relates to false positives. Any test has false positives. There is certainly a possibility of that, and most of these tests are weighted in the direction of false positives versus false negatives, because we certainly don't want to think that somebody doesn't have COVID-19 when they do. And so it's very important to realize that you may have some false positives. I don't know how to tell you to determine how, if you've had a false positive or the circumstances under which you should suspect that, because people can be asymptomatic and still have COVID-19. So you have to take the precautions whether or not you might feel that you have an false positive or not. Now, if you have some data that you can share with me or with the Department of Health, I do encourage you to relate your concerns directly to the Department of Health if you think you have some evidence that would lean toward the idea that we're having a number of false positives that are really skewing what's happening in your population. And so that type of information is very important as it relates to making future decisions about testing. I did want to point out one thing about the testing for persons supported. This is something that has given me some concern over the course of the last couple of weeks, maybe the past 4 weeks in particular, because the positivity rate has increased significantly during this period. Last week, I reported some data, and we were running right around a 25% positivity rate. That's much higher than the state in general. And right now, over the last 2 weeks, for persons supported, we have had a 39.45% positivity rate, comparing to a 6.14% positivity rate for the state as a whole. That is of concern. What a high positivity rate generally means is that we're not testing enough people. And so if we were testing more people, we'd probably be finding more cases than we have been. The rates from last week have gone up for persons supported, gone up for staff in our system. Last week was a particularly low week. I'm going to consider that an outlier. Overall, the trend is downward, but we are still having a number of cases, and it is above the threshold of concern that the Department of Health has set. So I just want to encourage people, we need to continue with this testing program. We need to continue taking the precautions that we're taking. I do want to encourage you that if you have concerns about visitation, if families are concerned about visitation, you do need to make accommodations to try to help them. Use FaceTime, try to come up with a distance method of visitation, make sure people are wearing masks, other things that will protect you. You know, I think that there is a need to make accommodations there, but you should also be looking at the data for your particular county to make decisions about whether or not it's a good idea to do visitation. And where there are high rates of spread of the coronavirus, you should be very careful about doing any kind of visitation and using your Appendix K authority to be able to do that. So it's a decision-making process. It's use of data to make those decisions. I think that's most important. Kara?
Thanks a lot. And he did mention, and Dr. Davis did mention, and we did get a question about how accurate the saliva tests were from Everly Wells and false positives. And as Dr. Davis mentioned about the false positives, if you have concerns about those, to reach out to the Department of Health.
Yeah, and
okay.
Kara, I'll just add specifically with relation to Everly Well, it's pretty much the equivalent of any of the other tests that are offered out there. This is one that the Department of Health screened, and it's FDA approved. It does have emergency approval, FDA approval, but it has been approved. So it's in the range of any of the other tests that are offered.
All right, thank you very much for that clarification, Dr. Davis. That's definitely important since many people are using the Everly Well test right now. Okay, our next question is in regards to IDD integration, and the question we got was, how will therapy visits for SLP, OT, and PT change with the amount of time we can see the clients and how we bill? I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Davis to address where we are in the integration process in regards to clinical services.
Yes. So we are in the process of trying to gather information from providers about how to shape this system going forward. This is a unique opportunity that we have to recreate the system. I want to reassure people that we haven't made any decisions related to this as yet. And one of the things I've asked our directors at central office to do is to reach out to the regional providers of clinical services and to our community providers of clinical services to gather information about concerns about the existing system, things that we'd like to see improved, and also things that that we might just like to add in or to make the system better. Those types of suggestions at this point, and we are going to be scheduling some opportunities, some forums for people to be able to provide their input on this. And so I don't want anybody to panic, to think that there's a lot of decisions being made that they're not part of at this point. This is a heavy lift that we're doing, and we've got a lot of information together, and we are in the process of doing that. I've already, as a matter of fact, asked my directors to draft some concerns about that they want to try to address in this upcoming system that we're going to have, an integrated system. So I just want to encourage people that you're not being left out. We're not leaving you behind in this. We are going to have ways of gathering your feedback and shaping the system in a way that is going to help the people we support, which is our primary aim. Kara?
Thank you, Dr. Davis. And one thing I will mention really quickly in regards to IDD integration is that informal feedback period has closed as of Friday. We received a lot of feedback, and over the past few days, some of us have read every single piece of the feedback we received and really worked to identify and address some of the questions, concerns, and suggestions going forward. So we thank everyone for providing us from that feedback. We got it from everyone, both families, providers, advocacy agencies, ECF choices, person supported, and also just a wide swath of people who are concerned and excited about where we're headed towards IDD integration. And this feedback is very important to us. Like I said, I have read all of it, and we are really working to make sure that that it informs our future design as we move forward with a single system. So we appreciate all of that feedback, and of course, there will be more opportunities to provide feedback and input in the future. Next question, regarding the homebound billing requirements, will any exceptions be made for individuals who are placed under quarantine but do not meet the billing requirements? For example, if someone utilized community participation but was placed on quarantine during the last 2 days of the billing period, could an exception be made to allow us to bill for those days? We are in the process of currently researching the answer to this question, and we will communicate the answer once we have researched and reviewed it. But we appreciate the question and wanted to acknowledge that we received it. Our next question is are those who utilized homebound prior to COVID-19 still required to submit all documentation every 90 days to be reviewed and approved? This seems unnecessary when the person will be approved for homebound regardless. Deputy Commissioner Jordan Allen will address this and discuss the steps moving forward. Jordan.
Sure, thanks, Kara. Good morning, everybody. So with the extension for homebound services now applying to the 31st of December, traditional requests for homebound services for those who meet criteria regardless of the COVID pandemic have largely stopped and don't need to be submitted. Obviously, the periods of approval run in 90-day increments. If we should have a better understanding as to whether or not there will be an extension beyond the 31st of December, typically a couple of weeks before the expiration of the current extended allowance. We'll communicate that in the event that things have improved to the extent that an extension is not warranted, then people that are submitting based on the criteria stated in the definition can resume submissions and, within a couple of weeks of the end of the expiration. So we'll communicate as we get closer to time. Right now, obviously, the approval period for all who have day services extends all the way until the end of December. So there's no need for submission for 90 days of approval when we already have approval that runs much longer than that.
Okay, and we have a few questions submitted left. I just want to give people ample notice that then we'll be moving to the chat box if people would like to start putting questions in the chat box for us to answer. Our next question is in regards to back in May, DIVD presented a WebEx meeting with certain providers as a panel to talk about COVID strategies, which, by the way, that recording is still on our COVID page if people would like to see it. Someone asked if it's possible that we could do this again and have an eye towards looking at the future of operating within a long-term pandemic. Jordan, do you want to address that? Hey, Jordan, I think you might be on mute now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just got off mute. Can you reread the question, please, Kara?
Sure. This is about doing a WebEx with providers about presenting on strategies towards long-term operating within the pandemic.
Yeah. So we did, as indicated, we did hold a stakeholder feedback session with several providers across the state previously, collected some good information on that, and we certainly, as we start to move closer into the fall, we'll hold another session, probably get that group of providers and then expand a little bit from there and kind of come together again to think a little bit about what services may look like in an ongoing pandemic. Obviously, with the simultaneously occurring alignment efforts, with the development of the amendment that ultimately will be forthcoming here in the next couple of months, there's some multiple competing priorities. But I think that was valuable. I think that the providers who participated brought good information and participation to the table. And so, yeah, I think absolutely we should do that again.
Yeah, we'll look to get something on the books probably sometime in the month of October, if that would be helpful to folks. And once again, that initial session can be found on the COVID page. We did record that WebEx. We have a question about any updates on the hazard pay funds and if they will be paid for claims past the 7/24 cutoff date. Deputy Commissioner Kidd is out of the office today. However, we are continuing to accept those claims, and based on the availability of funds, we will look to see if we can pay them. And we are really encouraging people to continue to submit these claims because we will pay retroactively if the funds are available. Jordan, do you want to mention anything else about that?
No, I think that covers it. I mean, we are encouraging provider agencies to continue to submit information that qualifies them for PCRD or RSNA. And in the event that obviously we're still tallying final expenditures, in the event that there are additional funds, and this is not to insinuate in any way that there are, but we want to have accurate record of those claims so we can pay those, even including and up to retroactive payments, should additional funds be added to the pot to pay. So at this point, we're collecting them. I know that we've had providers from respective regions reach out and say that they've received information stating they should stop submitting. And in fact, that's not true. We do want you to keep submitting those claims. And in the event that there are funds available to pay those claims, we want to be able to pay them. So keep tally, keep record, and keep submitting. Go through your local regional office to collect those submissions. And we're putting all that information together and getting it over to TennCare on a weekly basis. And we want to continue to do that until you hear otherwise.
All right. We do have one more question that we'll answer. And if there's not going to be anything in the chat box, we'll continue on with our day. But the last question we have that was pre-submitted was, when does the state of emergency expire? And when does the background check requirement start again? Teresa Sloan, our General Counsel and Assistant Commissioner, is on the phone. And Teresa, can you provide an answer to this question?
Sure, Kara. The executive order was just extended by the governor and is set to expire on September 30th. Based upon that, this reprieve from having to submit background checks will be extended to September 30th. We do not know whether or not that executive order will be extended further. What we do know is that if it is not, we will get communication out to providers that background checks must again be completed. But I do want to remind everyone that the language in the executive order provides for a 90-day window following the expiration, and that 90 days is for y'all to submit to either the TBI or a private investigation company to run the background check. It is not to submit the background checks to us for exemptions or anything else. It is simply to get them submitted to be run. As we know, there may be some backup when background checks are started up again. So don't be concerned about that, because the 90 days is for you from your provider agency to submit to whoever is going to run that background check for you. If you have any questions about that, just let me know. Thanks, Kara.
Okay, we did get a question in the chat box. Is there any additional PPE equipment being procured by DIDD for distribution to providers? What things are available for providers presently? As I mentioned, Deputy Commissioner Kidd is out of the office today, but we are asking providers to seek PPE through vendors first. Just as a reminder, Dennis Watson, who coordinates all of our efforts with TEMA, Dennis, do you have anything you'd like to add about this since you are the person who coordinates these efforts?
Yes, we still are taking PPE requests. TEMA has asked that providers seek PPE through their vendors first. If they can't get something like the vendor's out of gloves or something, yes, they can request things of that nature, but TEMA does not want us to be treated as the automatic go-to without seeking purchasing through proprietary means first. But other than that, we are still taking form stack requests for PPE, and that stuff is being routed through to TEMA, and TEMA is fulfilling it as the supply chain management deems the priorities that are set forth at their level. Other than that, I don't have anything else.
Thank you very much, Dennis, and thank you for answering that question and letting me put you on the spot. We did get a question about, is there any update on the Katie Beckett waiver? Commissioner Turner, would you like to, do you have anything to say about this or not? We are still continuing to work through the process on this.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and thank you for the question, Kara. No, we do not have an update, but I want to be very clear with everyone that not having an update, not being prepared are two completely different things. We're certainly working to make sure that we're partnering with TennCare and with everyone internally for when we do get approval from CMS, that we're going to be ready to roll when the Katie Beckett waiver is formally launched. So we know that it's important. We know that it's important to families, and there's a significant amount of focus around that. But we still do not have an update back from CMS, but we're continuing to do everything we can to make sure that we're ready when we do get that formal approval. We can launch that and we can hit the ground running. So as soon as we have anything new, obviously our community and the folks inside the provider network will be the first ones to know about that, and we'll make sure we get you that information. Thanks, Kara.
And once we do receive CMS approval, we will communicate that information to everyone, and of course we are working very diligently on the back end to prepare for implementation of this program. So thank you for the question. Do I see any other questions? I do not. So with that, I think that one thing that Teresa Sloan would like to mention about the Katie Beckett program is in regards to provider amendments. Teresa, would you like to take that on?
Sure, Kara, it'll be quick. I just wanted providers to be aware that as soon as it is approved, we will be loading provider agreement amendments into the portal to be signed. All this amendment will do is add the name of the Katie Beckett waiver and the control number to the provider agreement, so that if providers are wanting to provide services under Katie Beckett, they will be able to do so under their current provider agreement, and we will not have to go through the process of issuing a whole new provider agreement for just that program. Thanks, Kara.
All right. And like I said, we have no more questions in the chat box, so we will call it a week. And I will turn it over to Commissioner Turner to see us out.
Thanks, Karen. Again, thank you, everyone, for your questions that you submitted and your interaction, obviously, with us through the chat box. We continue to see that there's significant value in this, and I think it's important for us as we're continuing to move forward, as the question around Katie Beckett and some of the other programs alluded to, that we keep open, clear communication channels and make sure that we're all sharing the same messaging. I think part of the challenge for us sometimes is we get bits and pieces of information, and we share what we know or what we don't know, and then rumor becomes fact, and that's certainly something we want to avoid in this. Please continue to work with us around the communication and what we're sharing. Continue to submit your ideas and your vision around what you're hoping the new integration looks like, because we certainly want to continue to be partners in that. I know there's always been conversation around that this is probably pretty far down the track. It's not, and I want to make sure we drive that point home, that we're still wanting to make sure we get as much feedback as we can from persons supported, from individuals inside the provider network, anyone that's got a stake in this. We are going to continue to listen and continue to work with you as we develop this system to be world-class. So thank you again for your time on a Wednesday, and we look forward to talking to you next week. Thanks, Kara.
Okay, thank you all very much for joining us today. We had over 330 participants, so that tells me that you all are still desiring us to continue these. So we appreciate the feedback and the opportunity to ask and have questions asked and answered on a weekly basis. As always, please continue to send us your questions throughout the week, and we will take those first next Wednesday, and we will talk to you then. Bye.